Be me McKenna, 29, social media manager for some soulless fashion brand. My job is basically to convince people they need things they don't, using words they don't understand. I'm good at it. Very good. Live in a nice condo downtown that I pay for myself. I have a cat, a ficus tree, and an expensive subscription to a wine delivery service. By all modern metrics, I've made it. My social media feed is a curated masterpiece of empowerment, brunch photos, and exotic travel destinations. Lots of captions about knowing your worth and cutting toxic people out of your life. My friends and I are the same. We're a little tribe of strong, independent women. Our group chat is a constant stream of screenshots of dumb guys on dating apps and affirmations about how we don't need a man. Except, of course, when we want one for a night. My whole philosophy for the last decade has been about freedom. Freedom to do what I want, when I want, with who I want. My body count is, to put it mildly, extensive. I see it as a badge of honor, a sign that I've rejected patriarchal norms and lived life on my own terms. I've had more fun than most people will have in 3 lifetimes. But recently, something started to shift. It wasn't a sudden change, more like a slow, creeping realization. I'm turning 30 next year. My social media feeds, once filled with wild party pics from my friends, are now slowly being replaced. Engagement rings, gender reveal parties, mortgages. My best friend from college just posted a picture of her ultrasound. It felt like getting hit by a bus. We used to be the ones taking shots at 2 a.m. Now she's picking out names. I called my friend Elena to vent. Elena is my closest friend in the city. We work at the same company, different departments. She's always been the more level-headed one. I told her about the ultrasound picture and how it felt like everyone was moving on to a different chapter. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stuck with me. She suggested that maybe it wasn't a different chapter, but just the natural next one. And maybe it was time for me to think about what my next chapter looked like. I laughed it off, called her an old soul, but the words lingered. That night, I got a text around 11 p.m. It was from Cameron. Cameron is a recurring character. Looks like a model, has the personality of a cardboard box. Our interactions are purely transactional, a text, a meetup, and then radio silence for a few weeks. It used to be exciting. Now, it just felt empty. I looked at his text. You up? For the first time ever, I ignored it. I sat on my couch, sipping my expensive wine, and scrolled through my contacts. It was a graveyard of short-term flings and one-night stands. Names I barely remembered. I realized Elena was right. I was tired. I was tired of the game, tired of the meaningless interactions. I wanted something real, but not just something real. I wanted something to prove I could have it all. I could have the wild past and the stable future. I decided it was time to settle down, but not with just anyone. It had to be someone who was my equal, successful, intelligent, confident. Someone who wouldn't be intimidated by me. A real man, not a boy like Cameron. I had a new project. Operation Find a Husband. A few weeks later, we were at a party. One of our coworkers was leaving the company, so it was a big send-off at his huge loft apartment. It was the usual scene. Loud music, people trying to talk over it, lots of cheap beer, and a few bottles of decent liquor for the important people. I was in my element, holding court with Elena and a couple of other girls from work. I was telling them about my latest dating app disaster. Some guy had the audacity to ask me what I was looking for on the first date. I recounted how I told him I was looking for a good time, not a long time, and how he got all weird and quiet after that. I framed it as a hilarious story about male fragility. Honestly, I said, leaning in conspiratorially, men can't handle a woman who is as free as they are. They say they want a freak in the sheets, but the moment they realize you've had more experience than them, they short-circuit. The girls laughed and nodded in agreement. Elena just sort of smiled, that same quiet, reserved smile she always does when I go on one of my rants. And that's when I saw him. His name was Alec. He worked in the engineering department. I didn't know him well, but I knew who he was. He was standing across the room, talking to another engineer. He wasn't loud or flashy. He was dressed well, in a simple, classic way. No trendy logos, just clothes that fit. He had this calm, self-assured aura about him. He wasn't desperately scanning the room for women. He was just genuinely engaged in his conversation. He laughed at something his friend said, and it was a real deep laugh. Not the performative cackle you hear from guys like Cameron. He was handsome, but in a mature, masculine way. Not a pretty boy. He was, in a word, a grown-up. I nudged Elena. "Who's the guy in the blue shirt?" I asked, even though I already knew. "That's Alec, from IT, she replied. "He's super smart, a bit quiet, but a really nice guy." "Nice guy," I repeated, a smirk on my face. "Let's see about that." This was it. This was my target. He was perfect, successful, good-looking, and clearly not a part of the chaotic dating scene I was so tired of. Conquering him would be the ultimate validation. I excused myself from my circle and began to make my way across the crowded room. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was what I was good at, the hunt. As I got closer, I could hear a snippet of their conversation. They were talking about a camping trip they had taken a few weeks ago. Something about a difficult trail and a great view from the summit. It was so wholesome, so different from the usual party talk about office gossip or getting wasted. I waited for a pause in their conversation, and then I made my move. "I hate to interrupt a classic boys' night story," I said with my most charming smile, but I was getting bored of talking about office politics over there. I directed my attention entirely to Alec. His friend gave me a polite smile and quickly made an excuse to go get another drink, leaving us alone. Perfect. Alec turned to me. His eyes were a calm, steady blue. "No problem," he said. His voice was even and composed. Office politics can be a drain. I launched into my usual routine, the one that had never failed me. I started with some light teasing, complimented his shirt, asked him what a brilliant engineer like him was doing at a boring corporate party. I made sure to laugh at just the right moments, to touch his arm lightly when I was making a point. It's a dance I'd perfected over the years. But something was off. He wasn't responding the way men usually do. He was polite. He answered my questions. He was perfectly civil. But there was a wall there, a professional, impenetrable distance. There was no spark in his eyes, no leaning in closer, no mirroring of my body language. He was just listening, like a polite colleague making small talk by the coffee machine. I started to feel a little flustered. I decided to up the ante. "So, what's a guy like you do for fun when he's not climbing mountains?" I asked, lowering my voice a little, trying to make it more intimate. "I read a lot, work on a few personal coding projects, spend time with my family," he said, without a hint of irony or flirtation. It was the most straightforward, boring answer I had ever heard, and for some reason, it made me want him even more. I tried a different angle. "A family man, I like that," I said. "It's rare these days. Most guys our age are still trying to relive their frat boy days." I was trying to create a me and you against the world vibe. "I guess everyone has different priorities," he said, taking a small sip of his drink. He looked over my shoulder, as if looking for someone. The conversation was dying, and I was losing him. I was in uncharted territory. I made a last-ditch effort. "Well, I should let you get back to your friends," I said. "But maybe we could grab a coffee sometime. I've been meaning to pick an engineer's brain about a little app idea I have." It was a lie, of course, but it was a professional excuse to see him again. He gave me a small, tight-lipped smile. "I'm pretty swamped with a big project launch right now," he said. "Maybe some other time." And that was it. The classic polite corporate rejection. It wasn't "I have a girlfriend." It wasn't "I'm not interested." It was the gentle professional brush-off you give to a coworker you don't want to offend. He said it was nice talking to me, then turned and walked back to his friend, who had magically reappeared. I stood there for a second, my charming smile frozen on my face. I had never been so thoroughly and politely shut down in my entire life. I walked back to my friends, feeling a strange mix of humiliation and intense frustration. "Well?" Elena asked, her eyebrows raised. "He's shy," I said, a little too quickly. "Totally intimidated by me. I'll have to try again when he's not so overwhelmed." Elena gave me a look that said, "I don't think that was the problem," but she didn't say anything. The rest of the party was a blur. I drank too much, laughed too loudly. I even flirted with Cameron when he showed up later, just to prove to myself that I still had it. He, of course, responded exactly as I expected, all over me in seconds. But it felt hollow. It felt like a consolation prize. I went home alone that night. The polite indifference in Alec's eyes burned into my mind. I wasn't just rejected. I was dismissed. I was treated like I wasn't even in the running. This had never happened to me before. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The easy confidence I had felt for the last 10 years was gone, replaced by a gnawing sense of confusion. What was wrong with me? No. The question was, what was wrong with him? He was probably one of those guys, the kind who are secretly terrified of a woman's power. He probably wanted some meek, quiet little mouse who would bake him cookies and never challenge him. The thought made me angry. It was a comforting anger. It was easier to be angry than to be confused. It was his problem, not mine. He was the one with the issues. Toxic masculinity, most likely. Afraid of a woman who was his equal in confidence and experience. I fell asleep clinging to that thought. My new project had just gotten more complicated. It wasn't just about getting a husband anymore. It was about proving a point. It was about making Alex see that he was wrong. I would make him want me. And then, once I had him, I would be the one to decide if he was good enough. The next week or so at work was tense, at least for me. I saw Alec a couple of times in the hallway and in the cafeteria. He'd give me a polite nod and a small smile, the same one he gave everyone, the same one you give to the security guard or the cafeteria lady. I was just part of the background to him. It drove me crazy. I tried to get more information from Elena, but she was being cagey. "Just leave him alone, McKenna," she'd say. "He's a good guy. Don't make him your next project." Her words just fueled me more. What did she mean, good guy? As if I were some kind of villain. I was a good woman, strong, successful, independent. Any man would be lucky to have me. Alec just needed his eyes opened. He was stuck in some kind of old-fashioned mindset. I started to formulate a new plan. My direct approach had failed. It was too aggressive for a guy like him. I needed to show him my other side, the intelligent, thoughtful, progressive side. I needed to engage him on an intellectual level. I needed to show him that my freedom wasn't just about sleeping around. It was a deeply held philosophical belief. My chance came about a month after the party. The company announced its annual corporate retreat. It was more of a big fancy party at a hotel downtown, meant to boost morale. Everyone had to go. It was the perfect venue, more professional than a loft party, more relaxed than the office. This would be my stage. I spent more time planning my outfit and my strategy than I did on my actual work that week. I decided on a look that was professional, but undeniably feminine, a tasteful dress that showed off my figure without being overt. I would be the picture of the modern woman who has it all: brains, beauty, and a successful career. The night of the event, I felt that familiar buzz of adrenaline again. I walked into the hotel ballroom, scanning the crowd, and there he was. He was talking to a group of people, a mix of engineers and people from marketing. And of course, Elena was there, right by his side. Perfect. I took a deep breath, grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and made my way over. This time, I wouldn't be the aggressor. I would be the intellectual, the conversationalist. I would join their circle, charm them all, and show Alec what he had so foolishly dismissed. This was my game. I was a social media manager. Manipulating conversations was my specialty. I approached the group with a warm, friendly smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting," I said, sliding into the circle next to Elena. They all greeted me warmly, all except Alec, who just gave me that same infuriatingly polite nod. I didn't let it deter me. I listened patiently as they discussed some new software implementation. I nodded intelligently, even though I didn't understand half of what they were saying. I waited for my moment. It came when one of the marketing guys made a joke about his wife being angry at him for working late. It was the perfect opening. "Ah, the classic ball and chain," I said, with a light, playful laugh. "It's amazing how we still cling to these outdated relationship models, isn't it?" The group looked at me, a little surprised by the sudden shift in topic. I had their attention, and I had Alex. He was watching me now, his expression unreadable. I pressed my advantage. "I just think it's fascinating," I continued, adopting a more thoughtful academic tone. "We've evolved in every other area of our lives: technology, career, travel. But when it comes to relationships, so many people are still stuck in the 1950s. "What do you mean?" one of the marketing women asked. "I mean this obsession with monogamy, with ownership," I explained. "This idea that you have to find the one and then lock it down forever. It's so limiting. It creates so much pressure and insecurity." I could feel the atmosphere in the group shifting. It was becoming a little uncomfortable. But I was on a roll. "Think about it," I said, looking around the circle. But my words were aimed directly at Alec. A healthy modern relationship should be based on freedom and trust, not rules and possession. Who your partner was with before you, or who they might be with in the future. It shouldn't matter if the connection you have is real. I took a sip of my champagne, feeling confident. I was sounding smart, progressive, secure. Then I decided to go for the kill. It all comes down to insecurity, really, especially male insecurity. This obsession some men have with a woman's past, with her body count, it's just a manifestation of their own toxic masculinity. They're afraid of being compared. They're afraid of a woman who has her own experiences and isn't defined by just one man. I let the words hang in the air. The marketing guy who made the initial joke looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Elena was staring at the floor, a slight blush on her cheeks. I had done it. I had laid my entire philosophy on the table. I had shown them all, shown him, that I wasn't just some party girl. I was a woman with a deep modern understanding of the world. I turned to Alec, a triumphant, challenging smile on my face. "Alec," I said, making sure everyone was listening, "you're a logical guy, an engineer. You have to agree that judging someone based on an arbitrary number from their past is completely irrational, right?" The silence was deafening. It felt like the entire ballroom had gone quiet. Everyone in our little circle was looking at him, waiting for his response. I had him cornered. He could either agree with me and admit I was right, or he could disagree and reveal himself to be the insecure, old-fashioned man I suspected he was. Either way, I won. Alec looked at me for a long moment. His face wasn't angry or defensive. It was perfectly calm, like a teacher about to explain a complex but simple truth to a confused student. He set his drink down on a nearby table, giving the gesture a sense of finality. He wasn't just responding, he was closing a case. "McKenna," he started, and his voice was so level it cut through the background chatter. "I'm going to be very direct with you, because you've asked a direct question in a very public forum." My triumphant smile faltered a little. This wasn't the flustered defense I was expecting. "You're right about one thing," he said. "I am a logical person, and logically, every decision we make is based on data. We gather data to predict future outcomes." I had no idea where he was going with this. The marketing people looked intrigued. "When I'm looking for a partner," he continued, his eyes locked on mine, "I'm not looking for a weekend diversion. I'm not looking for a fun story to tell my friends. I'm looking for a lifelong partner, a wife, the future mother of my children." The words wife and mother hung in the air. They felt so heavy, so permanent. And for that role, the most important qualities to me are loyalty, trust, and the ability to form a lasting, exclusive bond. That is my priority. That is my goal. He paused, letting the words sink in. I could feel Elena shifting uncomfortably next to me. "Your past choices, your body count, as you call it, are simply data points," he went on, his tone still perfectly even. "It's not about jealousy or insecurity. It's about pattern recognition. A long history of casual, short-term, non-committal encounters is a data set that strongly suggests a person is not oriented towards, or practiced in, the skills required for a stable, long-term, monogamous relationship." My face felt hot. He was dissecting me like a piece of code. "To use an analogy an engineer would understand," he said, "if I'm going to build a house that I plan to live in for the rest of my life, I want to build it on a solid, untouched foundation. I don't want to build on a plot of land that has been used for countless temporary structures, a place that has been drilled, excavated, and abandoned by dozens of other builders. It's not a judgment on the quality of the land. It's an assessment of its suitability for my specific permanent project." The silence was absolute. The analogy was brutal. It was clean, logical, and it completely dismantled my entire argument. He had taken my accusation of toxic masculinity and turned it into a calm, rational assessment of risk and compatibility. "You and I are not building the same kind of structure, McKenna," he concluded, his voice softening just a little, as if he were delivering bad news to a colleague. "You're looking for someone to admire your series of impressive tents. I'm looking for someone to help me build a fortress. Our life goals are fundamentally incompatible. So, to answer your question," he said, finally breaking his intense gaze, "it's not irrational to consider a person's past. It's the most rational thing in the world. It's called due diligence." He picked up his drink again. "It was a pleasure talking to you all," he said to the group, giving them a slight nod. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me in the crater of his logic. I felt like I had been publicly stripped bare. The little group around me suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. The marketing guy remembered he had to find his wife. The woman he was with suddenly needed a refill. Within 30 seconds, it was just me and Elena. I turned to her, my mind reeling, expecting an explosion of supportive rage on my behalf. "Can you believe that?" I stammered, my voice trembling with a fury that was really just masking deep, profound humiliation. The nerve of him. That was the most misogynistic, arrogant thing I have ever heard. I waited for her to agree, for her to say, "What a pig, you're better off without him." But she didn't. Elena looked at me with an expression I had never seen from her before. It wasn't anger, it was pity. "Was it, though?" she said softly. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "What? Of course it was. He compared me to a used-up piece of land." "No, he didn't," Elena corrected me gently. "He didn't call you any names. He didn't insult you. He used an analogy to explain his point of view." "His point of view is sexist," I hissed. "McKenna," she said, her voice firm now, "you publicly cornered him and demanded his opinion. You called his potential preferences a sign of toxic masculinity. You didn't leave him any room to maneuver, so he gave you his honest, logical answer." I felt a fresh wave of betrayal. "So, you're on his side?" "There are no sides," she said, sounding tired. "He wants to get married and have a family. He has a very clear, very traditional idea of what he's looking for in a partner. He has a right to that. Just like you have a right to live your life however you want." Her words were reasonable. They were fair, and that made them hurt even more than Alex. "The problem," she continued, looking me straight in the eye, "is that you spent 10 years living a life that is fundamentally incompatible with the man you've suddenly decided you want. You can't have it both ways. Your choices have consequences." She reached out and touched my arm. "I'm going to go find my husband," she said softly. "I'll see you at work on Monday." And then she walked away, leaving me completely alone in the middle of the crowded ballroom. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My most cherished belief, that I could have a wild past and a stable future, that my choices had no bearing on my ultimate value as a long-term partner, had not only been rejected by the man I wanted, but it had also just been questioned by my best friend. I left the party without saying goodbye to anyone. The taxi ride home was silent. The city lights blurred past the window, a kaleidoscope of colors that just felt gray. When I got back to my condo, the silence was deafening. The ficus tree, the wine subscription, the minimalist furniture, it had all felt like the architecture of a successful life. Now, it just felt like an empty set. I took off the dress I had spent so much time choosing. It felt like a costume. I sat on my couch in the dark, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. His calm, measured voice. A data set that strongly suggests a person is not oriented towards a stable, long-term, monogamous relationship. I'm looking for someone to help me build a fortress. Your choices have consequences. I had always been so proud of my choices. I had worn them like armor, but what if my armor had been a cage all along? What if the freedom I had championed for so long was just the freedom to be alone? I tried to get angry again. I tried to summon the righteous indignation that had always been my shield. He's a dinosaur. He's afraid. He'll end up with some boring doormat and be miserable. But the anger wouldn't come. All I felt was a cold, heavy sadness. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Not that I was used land, but that we were incompatible. I had spent a decade practicing for a game, and he was playing a completely different sport. And I had just found out, in the most public and humiliating way possible, that I didn't know the rules. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up. A text message. It was from Cameron. "Hey, party was lame. My place?" I looked at the message, at his name. He was the living embodiment of the choices I had made. He was the data set. He was the long list of temporary structures built on my foundation. A few months ago, I would have seen this as an opportunity. A way to feel desired, to forget a bad night, to reassert my power. Now, it just felt pathetic. He was the consolation prize. The proof that Alec was right. Men like Cameron would always be available to me. Men like Alec would not. I realized with a sickening clarity that the men I wanted didn't want my experience. The only men who valued my experience were the ones who had no intention of staying. I had perfectly optimized myself for the kind of men I no longer wanted, and in the process, I had made myself completely unqualified for the one man I did. I deleted Cameron's text without responding and blocked his number. It was a small, meaningless gesture, but it was all I had. I turned my phone off and tossed it on the couch. I walked over to my laptop and opened it up. My social media profile was the home page. There I was, McKenna, smiling, confident, independent. I scrolled down my own feed, looking at my life through a new lens. There was a picture of me and Elena from a few years ago, raising glasses of champagne. The caption was, "Who needs a man when you have a best friend and a bottle of bubbly?" Elena was now married. She was with her husband at the party tonight. She had left me to go find him. I kept scrolling. A picture from a trip to Spain, me kissing a handsome stranger on the cheek. Caption, "Making memories all over the world." I couldn't even remember his name. He was just another data point. Another one, a quote I had shared. "A woman's past is her own. If a man can't handle it, he can't handle her." It had over 1,000 likes. It felt like reading the words of a naive stranger. I saw pictures of myself surrounded by friends at bars, on boats, at festivals, always smiling, always the life of the party. But in every photo, I was surrounded by a rotating cast of characters. Very few faces were consistent. My life wasn't a journey. It was a series of disconnected moments. I had collected experiences at the expense of building connections. I had championed freedom so fiercely that I had freed myself from everything that mattered. There, in the quiet of my expensive empty condo, surrounded by all the things I had bought to prove my success, I finally understood. Alec hadn't rejected me because he was weak. He had rejected me because he was strong. He had standards. He had a goal. He had a plan, and I was not a part of it. My entire identity, the strong, independent, free-spirited woman I had so carefully constructed, was a liability. The very things I had celebrated as my greatest strengths were, in the eyes of the man I wanted, my greatest weaknesses. The ultimate irony was that in my quest to have it all, I had ended up with nothing. Nothing but a cat, a ficus tree, and a hard-earned, undeniable, and utterly crushing solitude.